Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Today we're going to dive deep into, well, one of the most complex and frankly fast-changing geopolitical areas out there, the Eastern Mediterranean. We'll be focusing on Russia's influence, which is quite intricate, the shifting dynamics between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus, and something really interesting, new alliances popping up, especially India's growing role.
Exactly. And our mission really for this deep dive is to unpack how Russia's trying to maneuver strategically, how that hits Western alliances, and crucially, how the local players are actually responding. We're going to dig into some, well, pretty surprising facts, I think, and look at the motivations underneath it all. You'll see how things that seem separate are actually very connected. It's quite a picture.
Okay, let's start unpacking that with Russia's, let's call it assertive play in the Eastern Med. When we talk about Russia here, it's not just about wanting to look like a great power again in one spot. This is part of something much bigger, a more ambitious plan. The real insight, I think, is that Russia uses this region like a strategic lever, trying to chip away at Western unity, basically.
Right.
It complicates everything, policy, military stuff, across this huge area, from the Atlantic right over to the Black Sea, North Africa up to the Arctic. It really makes you wonder, what's the end game?
That's a great point. And what's really fascinating is how similar this playbook is to the old Soviet Union's approach. Very similar tactics. Though, of course, without the whole communist ideology part this time. They clearly want to stop Southeastern Europe fully integrating with NATO and the EU. They definitely see the Eastern Med as like a key flank in that bigger standoff with NATO.
So, okay, given that big picture strategy, why the Eastern Mediterranean specifically? What makes Turkey, Greece, Cyprus so appealing for Russia to cultivate?
Well, there are a few layers here. First, just pure geography, their location, how close they are to Russia, that's fundamental. Second, the region itself is, well, it's full of existing fault lines. Within these countries and between them, you've got economic problems, old border disputes, migration pressures, and definitely some disillusionment with the EU and the US in certain circles. Russia's really good at exploiting these existing cracks rather than making new ones, usually. Third, Moscow sees them as channels, ways to maybe influence wider European policy. Think sanctions, NATO expansion, democracy promotion stuff. Greece and Cyprus are in the EU, remember, and all three are NATO allies. And finally, yeah, there are economic angles, especially energy, and just this deep desire to have a seat at the table in any regional talks, to protect their own interests. They sometimes offer to mediate, but honestly, it often feels more about using the problems than really solving them.
That leads us nicely to Turkey, because Turkey really is Russia's most important partner there, but also maybe the most volatile. Turkey's obviously vital for Russian energy transit. Pipelines like Blue Stream, Turk Stream, designed specifically to bypass Ukraine. That energy connection has, historically anyway, helped keep things somewhat stable between them. Even after big blowups, like remember when Turkey shot down that Russian jet in 2015? But it's not like a permanent guarantee for Russia, is it? We're actually seeing Turkey importing less Russian pipeline gas now. Ankara is actively looking elsewhere, LNG, solar, wind.
Yes, and a really key piece to watch is the nuclear dependency. Rosatom, the Russian state company, isn't just building the Akuyu nuclear plant in Turkey. They're going to own it and operate it. That gives Russia a very long-term, kind of monopolistic footprint in Turkey's nuclear sector. That's a deep, multi-generational tie-in.
And then there's that, well, almost surprising personal chemistry between Putin and Erdogan. Seems like they share this resentment of what they see as Western dominance. And that helps them cooperate, especially after Turkey felt pushed away by the EU and US over human rights, Syria, the 2016 coup attempt.
Absolutely. The Kremlin was very quick to back Erdogan's story about the coup being foreign-sponsored. And they kept quiet during his purges afterwards. That really weakened the pro-Western elements in the Turkish military, which, suited Moscow just fine.
So this personal connection, it feeds right into Russia's aim of stirring up trouble within NATO, doesn't it?
Oh, directly. The whole S-400 missile sale to Turkey, that wasn't just about selling weapons for Russia. It was a brilliant move, strategically speaking, to just pour fuel on the fire within NATO. It got Turkey kicked out of the F-35 program, blocked from Patriots, hit with U.S. sanctions. For Russia, that's a definite win. Makes Western alliance stuff much harder.
But, despite all that cooperation, the relationship feels really brittle, almost like it lacks real strategic depth. You called it a strategic rivalry earlier, which feels right. You see them kind of managing things like in Syria or the South Caucasus, trying not to step on each other's toes too much.
Deconflicting.
But then they're directly competing in places like Libya and Ukraine, obviously. What's so interesting about Turkey is how it manages to be, a frenemy to everyone at once. It's a NATO member actively causing headaches for NATO,
Right.
while also selling drones to Ukraine that are crucial in fighting Russia, and backing Azerbaijan against Armenia, which also involves Russian interests. They even did Black Sea drills that probably made Moscow a bit nervous. It just shows this incredibly pragmatic, independent foreign policy. It's all about Turkish interests, not ideology.
Which then begs the question, what does the average Turkish person think about Russia? Because despite the leaders getting along, polls consistently show, more than half the Turkish public sees Russia as a threat. And the more conservative groups, they haven't forgotten Russia's past actions against Muslims, North Caucasus, Syria. So, yeah, the view from the top and the view from the street can be pretty different.
Okay, let's shift to Greece. This is a really fascinating case study in maybe Russian overreach, how Moscow pushed too hard and ended up triggering this big pivot back to the west by Athens. Historically, you can see why Russia was interested in Greece: location, history, Orthodox religion ties, even some leftover anti-American feelings. Russia was an important energy supplier too, though Greece has been really actively trying to find other sources: Azerbaijan, Egypt, Iraq, LNG imports.
Definitely. And during Greece's big financial crisis, Moscow tried to play the financial diplomacy card. But it quickly became obvious they just didn't have the money to offer a real alternative to the EU's bailout, however tough that was. Remember Gazprom's bid for DEPA, the Greek gas company? It was talked up hugely, but poof, never happened. All Russia could really offer were symbolic gestures, not real solutions. That was a big miss for Moscow, a real lost opportunity.
And then came the Prespa Agreement controversy in 2018. This is where things got really, really heated. You had allegations of widespread Russian interference in Greek politics, actual bribery, trying to whip up nationalist anger against the deal with North Macedonia over its name, a deal Russia hated.
Hated it. They desperately wanted to stop it.
But this kind of blatant overreach, it just backfired completely. Greece swung hard back towards the EU and the U.S. We've seen military ties get much stronger, a big expansion of U.S. bases like Alexandroupoli, which is strategically huge.
Absolutely. And that reorientation kicked off this massive shift in Greece's whole security thinking. They launched this huge military modernization plan, like 25 billion over 12 years. That's about 3.5% of their GDP, way over the NATO 2% target.
Wow.
Yeah, they're buying American F-35s, French frigates. It's a very clear signal. They're going all in on advanced Western tech and upgrading their defenses seriously.
And the crown jewel of that seems to be this Achilles shield. What exactly is that?
Okay, so this is a $2.8 billion project, supposed to be ready around 2027. Think of it as a massive integrated defense umbrella. It pulls together anti-drone, anti-ballistic missile, anti-regular missile, anti-aircraft, even anti-submarine capabilities. And it uses cutting-edge AI and drone tech.
So not just buying new ships or planes, but networking everything.
Exactly. It's a decisive move away from just traditional defense towards this high-tech, networked, multi-domain approach. A really big change for Greece.
Stepping back, what's the impact of Greece doing this on the rest of Europe?
Well, it positions Greece as kind of a trendsetter, pushing military modernization across the continent. You see other countries, Germany, Finland, Poland, also making big investments in advanced defense. Greece's actions are definitely feeding into those broader European efforts, like Rearm Europe or Readiness 2030. It creates momentum.
Okay, let's look at Cyprus now. It's always been this financial hub, but it seems wary of getting too close to Russia, despite the historical ties. Cyprus was super attractive for Russian money, right? Low taxes, that double taxation treaty, relatively light banking regulation.
Hugely attractive. It became a massive destination for Russian cash. Some of it, let's be honest, probably illicit.
The stat you mentioned earlier was incredible in 2019, like half of all Russian global investment flowed through Cyprus.
Yeah, though a lot of that was just passing through to go elsewhere. But still, it says something important. It shows a lot of Russians didn't trust keeping their money in Russia. It was capital flight, partly.
And again, during Cyprus's own financial crisis in 2012-2013, Russia couldn't really step in, could it?
No, same story as Greece, basically. They couldn't offer a credible alternative to the EU bailout, which was harsh. And because of that bailout structure, a lot of wealthy Russian depositors actually lost a significant chunk of their money held in Cypriot banks. That definitely limited Moscow's leverage afterwards.
Then there was the whole golden passport scandal, selling EU citizenship.
Right, to wealthy foreigners, including some Russian oligarchs who were later sanctioned. That scheme got shut down eventually because of corruption concerns.
Passports even got revoked, I think.
Some did, yes. Definitely didn't help Russia's image or its soft power efforts there.
What about security ties? Cyprus used to buy Russian arms.
Historically, yes, and they allowed Russian Navy ships to make port calls. But things have shifted. EU sanctions, plus worries about Russia getting closer to Turkey that's pushed Cyprus to look elsewhere for weapons,
Mm.
France, Israel, the US mainly. And they're much more open now to security cooperation with NATO. Though it's true they haven't completely shut the door on Russian port calls despite Western pressure. It's a balancing act for them.
And culturally, Russia has tried outreach, hasn't it? There's a big Russian-speaking community there.
They have tried, yes, but the impact seems pretty limited, actually. The local Cypriot media hasn't shied away from investigating iffy connections. And perhaps most significantly, the Cypriot Orthodox Church decided to recognize the independence of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah, it directly undermines Russia's whole narrative about the Orthodox Brotherhood. So overall, Russia's influence in Cyprus is maybe less than you'd expect.
Okay, this leads us to maybe the most surprising twist, these new alliances emerging.
Yeah.
Specifically, this India-Greece-Israel connection. What's driving that?
Well, a big part of it seems to be Turkey tilting more towards Pakistan. That's making India look for new friends in the region. And remember India's Operation Sindoor back in May 2025. The Turkish drones supplied to Pakistan were, frankly, pretty ineffective against India's air defenses. That probably sent a message.
So India sees common ground with Greece and Israel, partly because of Turkey's alignment with Pakistan.
It seems that way. India already has strong ties with Israel, of course, and Greece becomes a natural partner, especially with the potential for that IMS corridor, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor.
Right, that economic route physically linking these places.
Exactly. It creates a strong incentive for cooperation.
And then there's this missile deal speculation.
Mm-hmm.
India potentially supplying its LR-LACM to Greece. Tell us about that missile.
Okay, so the LR-LACM long-range land attack cruise missile. This is a big deal because it's India's own domestically developed missile. The DRDO, their defense research agency, developed it. Successfully tested just last year, November 2024. It's subsonic, meaning it flies below the speed of sound, hugs the terrain to avoid radar.
Stealthy.
Very. And it has a range up to 1,500 kilometers, can carry conventional warheads, potentially nuclear ones too. Designed for precision strikes against high-value targets, air bases, radar stations, air defenses. It's a serious piece of kit.
Wow, so if Greece got that, integrated it with their jets, their Rafales, their F-16 Vipers, what would that mean strategically?
It would be a huge shift, a massive deterrent. It would give Greece the ability to, well, proactively take out critical Turkish military sites deep inside Turkey. Think air bases near Izmir or Sanakal. Even Turkey's own S-400 systems could become vulnerable. It fundamentally changes the military balance in the Aegean.
And are there signs this is actually happening beyond speculation?
Well, the Indian Air Force Chief, Marshal A.P. Singh, was recently in Athens. He had detailed talks with his Greek counterpart. They reportedly discussed operational cooperation, joint training, and specifically lessons India learned during Operation Sindoor. So these aren't just casual chats. It signals a real, deepening strategic alignment.
How's Turkey reacting to all this?
Predictably, with alarm. Turkish media is framing this potential missile deal as a direct threat, maybe even revenge for Turkey helping Pakistan, especially after their drones didn't perform well. They're clearly worried about the regional balance of power shifting against them. You can understand why.
And what about inside India? Is everyone on board with this kind of alliance building?
Not necessarily uniformly. There are definitely internal debates in India about the wisdom and implications of these alignments, different viewpoints on geopolitics, strategic goals. It reflects their own complex domestic political scene. It's not a simple picture.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Looking back at our deep dive, it feels like Russia's influence in the Eastern Med, while it's definitely there and they're active, it's maybe more modest and opportunistic than sometimes portrayed.
I think that's fair. They often seem to be exploiting existing problems, economic crises, political disputes, rather than offering real sustainable solutions or building deep strategic partnerships.
The relationships often seem tactical, based on short-term convenience rather than long-term shared vision.
Exactly, and that leaves us with a really interesting thought moving forward. The Eastern Mediterranean clearly faces ongoing challenges, economic, political, security. So how might these new, maybe unexpected partnerships, like this potential India-Greece-Israel nexus, how might they reshape that delicate regional balance? And what does that mean for the traditional players like NATO and the EU? That's definitely something to keep watching as this whole complex situation continues to evolve.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Eastern Mediterranean's really dynamic geopolitical landscape. Please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network. And we genuinely want to hear what you think about all this complexity, so please share your thoughts in the comments section below.